Okay, so then you show up to my room now. Okay, so it's 2 o'clock. I can tell you my name is Ray Martin, and I'm a longtime member activist with the rare fruit growers, and I'm going to try something new today, something brand new. I used to speak to the rare fruit grower chapters many years ago, then I kind of took to the winds and did my own thing, and have had a lot of fun doing that. But Edgar asked if I would speak today, and I said I would more than happy to do that. So, where was I? Oh yeah, doing something new. So, I want to tell you that I'm not selling anything. I'm not getting any published recognition. I didn't really get too much in the way of compensation. So, so I'm basically like you. You know, I come here because I want to be here. And, but I'm also like you in that I'm learning as much as I'm giving. So when you talk to your neighbor, you tell them, oh yeah, I have that variety, and it does this and does that, and I use this fertilizer, and so on and so forth. You're sharing and you're receiving. So it's the same here. So I'm going to try something new today, and I'm going to try and learn from you guys. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to practice for a few seconds, okay? Now, you got to understand something. When a speaker is only given 45 or 50 minutes, they're rushed. At least I am, typically. I'm rushed. You know, oh, I've got to get all that information out. I've got to get the 10, 20 years of information out in 45 minutes. And so you're under this pressure to just like spew and talk all the time, right? And it's worked so far, but, you know, I'm going to relax a little bit today. I'm going to take it slower. We're going to learn, we're going to go and do some of the basics. We're going to learn a few little bits of advanced stuff. Oh, good. Yeah, I think you'll be happy. And that's my experiment right there. Okay? I need some feedback from you. Okay? So I need you to tell me, yeah, that was a good thing, or no, it wasn't. So the way we're going to start is, I was thinking, how do I do this? Do I have people clap? Do I have people whistle? What? And then I decided this morning that I'd have people hum. So I'd like to hear all the people that are members of CRFG just hum to me. Oh, okay, this is going to work. Okay, so from the Orange County chapter. Okay, that's good. LA chapter. You're running it. Let's see. All those like Elvis, yeah. All those that like Elvis? Okay. All those under 30. Okay. Hey, no fair, like bringing up the volume, okay? All those over 50. Okay, so is everybody practiced? Okay, any more questions need to know about? How was lunch? Pretty good, yeah. Okay, the reason I wanted to introduce that is because sometimes I need like a validation. No, not for me, but for the idea that I'm presenting, right? Sometimes there's things that are my observation, but maybe like I'm the only one. And that's happened before, right? I voted for... Oh, no. So, hey, how do you like my sense of humor? Hey, that was pretty good. I was expecting silence. All right. So I think we can formally start, right? Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background information. As I said, my name is Ray Martin. I used to work at... I got my start... Oh, before we start, I want to dedicate this talk to Alvin Lips, a master propagator who passed away this year, avocado and citrus propagator, and to Dr. Bob Berg, my mentor at UC Riverside. and to Paul Thompson, my friend in Bonzel, passed away last year. So Paul and George Emmerich got me started on this about 15 years ago. I was an avocado researcher at UC Riverside, and with assistance of Bob Berg, or vice versa, we developed the Land Pass avocado, and then the Surprise avocado, and the Gem avocado. So those three are released commercially. I took those plant breeding skills with me when I went privately into working with David Brooks, and we grew more than 250 certified avocado acres in North San Diego County. And then I went by myself in partnership with Henry Gearwig and Divine Organic Growers, and we grew 5 acres of Paul Thompson's hybrids, his S1, S2, S3 or Delight, and another one that we referred to as his Punch. So then I took it one step further, trying to determine if I could get self-pollination into the red-colored fruit. And you have to understand something, and back in the early years, I call it early years, that was about 14 years ago with Paul Thompson and George Emmerich and Jim Neitzel and Leo Manuel, we didn't know that much about dragon fruit. And we didn't even know that there were any varieties that were self-pollinating. And Paul did a very interesting thing. He got this Guatemalan race type that was given to him. I haven't found the source of that Guatemalan. And he crossed it with Jim Neitzel's white one, and he came up with about 20 seedlings he grew out, 10 of which were pretty good quality, and half a dozen of those 10 were really good quality. And so I commercialized 4 of those, as I stated, along with the Guatemalan race, the G2, which may be the American Beauty at the South Coast Research Station. So initially we thought that none of the dragon fruit were self-pollinating, that you had to hand-pollinate every flower. And then we started to find out or hear information that maybe, no, there were self-pollinating varieties, and Sven Merton was part of that process, and he drove up to Santa Barbara to Joyce Greenland's house and got this Joyce variety, and then there was Alice Snow in Chula Vista, and we had the Alice variety. So, and there were a lot of selections around, and Sven was collecting them from all over the world. But we started to see the pattern that most of these white types that were from Southeast Asia were in fact self-pollinating. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what I also noticed that what started to stand out for me was that the red ones, and that included all of Paul Thompson's selections, were not self-pollinating. They required hand-pollination. So I devised a little system to make that a commercial idea. And I did develop in partnership with Henry Gearwig, Divine Organic Growers, and then I sold that about 3 years ago, and then I'm just finishing up this research that I wanted to do, that I'd started way back with the idea of, because as soon as we found Joyce Greenland and we knew that was a self-pollinating selection, we hybridized these. So, but this has come sort of full circle, because what we've got here is actually a seedling from Edgar Valdivia. 2 years ago, Edgar gave me some little tiny plants, and I'd like to know, by hum, did anybody else receive those seedlings? Nobody? He had thousands of them. Okay, so there we go, little hum. Okay, so I need that feedback, remember? That's important to me, I appreciate it. So, because I'm just like you, remember? So, so I just had 2 or 3 of them, and I grew them up. And well, let's see if we can. Well, that's not where I wanted to go. Let's see here. Okay, so is it dragon fruit? Okay, Maggie, I'm already off my sequence. Let's see if we can go. Okay, we're off the sequence. Where's my epiphyllum? There it is. Okay. So, epiphyllum, the dragon fruit is in the family of the epiphyllum, and ornamental. So, what Edgar was successful in doing was hybridizing the epiphyllum with the Hyloceras undatus. Now, I'm going to go through the slides in a minute. It's going to happen real quick, and then you'll get the big display then. But the let's see here. What's this thing? Okay, so I'm going backwards. I stopped my train of thought. Okay, yeah, now I know. So, but I'm going to touch on a couple of things that are really imperative that you understand about dragon fruit. Now, you notice I spelled dragon fruit with a D? I'm an OP guy. I figure, dragon fruit, that's what's selling on the bottles, that's what's selling in the soap, that's what's selling in the shampoo. And so I'm a D guy. You got to think about it a little bit. So the species, of course, genus species is Hyloceras undatus. The true undatus probably is, I got this from Paul, is the white one, the one from Southeast Asia. So you hear white flesh, correct. So you've got the white flesh, you've got a red flesh, you've got magenta flesh, and pink flesh, and so on and so forth. But mostly we're talking about colored flesh versus the white flesh from Southeast Asia, and clearly different species. But all of them would be classified as dragon fruit, right? Hopefully, Maggie. Okay. All right. So this is the plant that Edgar gave me. Actually, he gave me the little seedling. And I didn't have any pollen at the time, so I've got new buds. I'll pollinate it in a few days. Okay, so where to start? So my topic today is the future of dragon fruit, I think. So, but I'm supposed to talk about where we're going with dragon fruit. But before we start with where we're going, we've got to kind of understand the crop. And then, do we start from the chicken or the egg? Do we start from the seed or the plant? Well, this is the full mature plant, and this is the 437 or the 37 that won the taste test a couple of years back at South Coast. And when we're talking about fully mature plants, we have to talk about the trellis system. So they need a very sturdy trellis system. I use metal and steel cable, and the plants can get quite heavy, as you know, the mature plants. And I just grow them from 1 gallons. I usually use a very close spacing because I grow all my own plant material. And I live in Rainbow, which is just south of Temecula on the 15. And I bought this location with the express purpose of not getting freeze damage, because on the other side of that valley, just on the right-hand corner, I used to live over there, and I got all my plant material burned one year, frozen to the ground. Now, the plant is pretty easy to root, right? Just like, and what I do is I just take my cuttings and I put them in, I put them in clay pots in a greenhouse. So when I use greenhouse, I don't use clear plastic. I use that translucent plastic, the white one. Or is that opaque? That's opaque, yeah. I use the opaque plastic. And that lowers the light wave. It breaks up the light wave, what it does. So you get a fractured light wave in the summer, and then in the winter it's warmer because it retains the heat. So I don't understand why anybody would use a clear plastic in Southern California. So if you're buying your polyfilm plastic for greenhouses, get that opaque type. It's got great UV inhibitor. So that's all I do. I just take them, put them in pots, and then when I'm irrigating my other plants in the greenhouse, they just root like that. That's just right there, no soil. No soil, because I keep the doors closed. They get 100% humidity in the greenhouse. So then when they're rooting, I just grow them up to the central leader. Now we're going to talk about horticulture a little bit in a minute. I like to think of myself as a horticulturist. In other words, I have like a partnership with the plant. You know, I'm taking care of the plant, it's taking care of me. So there's a little management. What's that? Symbiosis. Yeah, there you go. So this is how I start. I just train them straight up some kind of stake system. There's another way you can grow them from seedlings, and this is a juvenile stage of the dragonfruit. But it will grow right out of that as it goes up. It's still four-sided stem, but it will turn to three-sided as it gets larger. And ultimately, it will get full size on your trellis. And you can see that's a airline cable, steel airline cable covered with old PVC plastic tubing, and it's even bending that, so they get quite heavy. So be sure to make sure that your trellis system, your support system for these things is sturdy. Otherwise, you'd be picking it up off the driveway or the patio. That reminds me, George Emmerich called me not long after after he'd given me some of that white dragonfruit, the Hyloceras undetus, and he'd grown it up a dead avocado tree in one of those circular driveways. So the avocado tree had died, and he planted this dragonfruit on the corner of it, and it grew up the old stems. But when it got too heavy, it dropped right back down in the driveway, and he called me up and I picked up a truckload of cuttings. Okay, so you've gone through some of the other introduction where you have all kinds of damage from outside sources. Seems like everything likes this thing, right? Birds, squirrels, rats, gophers, mice, snails, you name it, right? So I've got some rabbit damage. So I had the central leader growing up, and I had some rabbit damage. I tried to protect it with tar. The only tar that was really effective is believe it or not, the oil-based tar, not the water-based. I used to always have water-based around, but then I needed some of the oil-based, and the rabbits don't like that as much. So, but here you've got to cut off the sucker growth and force that central leader. That's really important. When you see that stuff, and it comes up, even on healthy stems, you'll start to see the lower growth. So then you get the plant up, it's going over the trellis system, whatever you have, and this is a good sign. You know, the thing's growing. But you can have too many stems. It's shooting up. See if I can go back here. That remnant of white there is just whitewash. A lot of times, especially in San Diego, not this year, but in past years, you know, it gets hot in the summer. And so when we move them out, even from changing them, first, of course, I take them from the greenhouse, I move them into a shade house for a couple of weeks, and then I move them into the field. But even that, you're going to get burned beginning in like July, typically in July. So I usually just throw a diluted coat of white paint, you know, cheap white calcium carbonate paint. But now you're getting the growth, but it's too much growth. You're going to just... So what I do, and this is maybe the first thing that I could really introduce to you, is the management of the plant, where you start to basically have this partnership where you're managing this growth. And you want to select, of course, vigorous shoots. Now, this is the one part of horticulture that somebody can talk to you about, but they can't really teach you. You have to learn yourself. What happens is you need to get to the plant and you need to figure out, well, what do I think? How many stems do I think this plant can sustain? Because if it sustains too many, you're just going to get small growth off of those stems. And initially we're trying to develop a plant on the trellis system. So you can see there, the plant is healthy, but we've got a lot of new growth everywhere. Maybe we should be reducing it. Maybe. And this is where I'm going to get your feedback here in a minute. See, this is where we're managing the growth. We're reducing the number of shoots from what originally was a central leader. Remember how we moved that plant up the stake by forcing one primary shoot? We call it a central leader. And then as it gets up near the top of the trellis, then we allow it to bend over the trellis and throw up other shoots, side shoots, lateral growth, right? But then, how many? Should we just let it go, just randomly, where one plant might have 16, and the next plant might have 5, and the next plant, and then presumably then the following year, you would get those side branches having lateral growth, and then you could have any number of laterals from those, right? So you can, but the problem I've found is that you don't get these strong stems, and this is where you really want to develop your fruiting area. So I think it's very important you have some personal relationship with your plant, you grow it up, get it up to the top of your trellis, you're taking care of it with water and nutrition. You got it in the full sun, ideally, and then you start seeing the growth, getting the response from the plant, and then you start making some what you would call critical decisions on how you want to train it. Now, this work actually comes from work I did with training grafts, newly developing grafts, and if we have time, I'll tell you how really valuable that is. I mean, it's incredibly valuable. It's probably one of the most valuable things I learned over my entire horticultural experience. So anyway, there you get this nice growth, and in this case, 4 or 5. So far, what's the feeling on the managed horticulture? What do we call it? The personal relationship. How many people would like to see the plant just grow itself, sort of define its own identity? Am I getting a feedback of, Okay, nobody. So then that means that I'm getting a full audience of yes, we need to be, so let me hear the Oh yeah, wow, I'm really, that moves me actually. Easily moved. Okay, so there, you can see now that you're putting the growth. See, the plant is going to respond with some component of vigor, right? Regardless of how it's distributed on the plant. You got to conceptualize this now. So I have a plant. I have, let's call it X input. And let's say that X input is absolutely perfect. So I'm providing the perfect environment for this plant to survive and flourish. All right? So what do I expect with perfect input? What do I expect? I expect what? Y output. So use the X and the Y. So I'm going to get Y output every single time with perfect X input. Alright? Track me. So, if that Y output is distributed on 5 or 15 shoots, it's only going to be distributed as, let's call it 15Y. Now, if I can concentrate that into 2 or 3 shoots, then what happens is 15Y essentially equals 3Y, or I call it 3Y prime. I took too much engineering! The point is that you're going to get the same expressiveness. It's just that you're managing it. Okay? So, now, here's the really neat part, though. It really does get neat, because if that is the same as 15Y, right there, that one shoot is exactly the same as 15Y, then what you would see is 15 shoots, 1/15 the size of that, right? If just roughly. Well, if that's the case, how valuable are those little 1/15 shoots to you? Are they really going to produce the kind of fruit that you're desiring, especially if you're growing commercially? And the answer is no. Then the other really neat thing is, there's a juvenile response in new growth. Just by definition of juvenile, you have like this, in the case of plants, you have like elastic tissue. That's why in the early slide where we saw the seedling with all that very different stem characteristics, that's a juvenile condition. And juvenile conditions don't fruit because they're, by definition, juvenile tissue. It's when you get into mature tissue, mature defined by the ability to flower and propagate itself. So what you have with juvenile tissue is this elasticity, and so you get like really extended growth. So you get really healthy growth. So I said I was going to wait till the end of the talk if I had enough time, but when you're grafting, whenever you graft, how many people graft here? No, yeah, okay, fair amount. That way everybody gets it. See, the guy in the front, if he raises his hand, he doesn't know how many people, but we know. So, if you're grafting, and what are you looking for in a graft? The only thing you're looking for is growth, right? Well, come on, guys, you got better than that. You're looking for vigorous growth. So you get like 2 or 3 shoots. And there's very few people that are willing to just quickly take off 2 of those shoots if you've got 3. Or 3 of the 4. Or pinch 2 of the 3. Just pinch the little terminals and stop them. And the reason you're doing that is because you're trying to encourage the one growth. Because what's going to happen is we're getting that output. We put the input, we're receiving the output. It's our turn now to try to transfer that output, however energetic it is. If I do I'm going to get off a tangent, but if I do a wheat graft and there's poor connection, my output is really going to be responding to my input. My input was poor, so I'm going to get poor output. But still, I can maximize that output by concentrating it into one shoot. When you do that, when you concentrate it into a single shoot, you'll get increased size of that shoot. And you have to very quickly, within days, believe it or not, you have to tie little stakes to hold it up. Because it will get so heavy it will pull away from your graft stick. So you've got to quickly, as soon as it shoots out, start removing it. You can actually, with your finger, just remove some of the smaller shoots. Or if you fail to do that early, you can pinch them as they come out. You get the one single shoot, you stake that up, and keep staking it as a one single central leader. Now what happens is, you're getting stem elasticity because it's a juvenile tissue response. It's all juvenile tissue. It's very elastic, it'll get very big, and that juvenile tissue will actually influence the mature tissue of the graft. So if you have a graft stick the size of my finger, and you get this little shoot coming out from your graft, and you develop this large 1 foot shoot coming up, and you're tying it, it's going to be quickly 2 feet. At the base, it's going to be actually larger than the size of my finger. It's going to be like an overgrowth. Well, the stem will actually influence the base, and that will increase the size of the graft to maybe the size of my wrist, believe it or not. And then the size of my wrist will increase the surface contact of the base. And it's just like an exponential effect. So for all of you that hummed on the graft, try that. Well, the same is true here. You're getting this juvenile response, and you get this beautiful growth. And so then you get the healthy plant. And then there's that exponential effect, because as soon as you have this large-stemmed, healthy plant, of course it's receiving sunlight, and it's developing more sugars, and so now you've developed the system. It's going to start growing for you, right? So that's all the basics. And then finally you start to see the flower buds emerge, and it gets nicer and nicer and nicer, and oh my gosh, life is good. And let's see, it's just a beautiful sequence there. The question was, is this the undatus flower? This is the dragonfruit flower. Remember, we have Hyloceras undatus, we have Hyloceras guatemalensis, we have... so I refer to all of these as dragonfruit. All those fruit on the table, dragonfruit. Anyway, so it's a beautiful experience, and then you see this guy. Okay. Well, are we happy or sad? How many people are happy? How many people are sad? No sad? Okay. That's a mixed bag. You know, it's a mixed bag. I'll show you in a minute. There he is. And there it is. Or there it is. And that's the problem, right? Either the flower is self-fertile or it isn't. If it's not self-fertile, then is the bee doing us any good? No, actually it's not. If the plant is self-fertile, now you would say, oh, well, sure, like we go to the South Coast Field Station, we see that they don't have any hand pollination in there. And so that means that they're getting a transfer of pollen from other varieties. And the only vector, in this case the bee, is the bee. Right? Oh, you could have ants, you could have moths at night, but likely it's the bee. And no, I'm going to hold questions to the end, okay? Because then I'll get, trust me, I'm easily confused. So, and this is a critical juncture, actually. It's this idea about self-fertile versus self-infertile. So, let's proceed here. Okay, so what we've been taught from some of the literature and some of the Yahoo page by Leo. Is Leo here? No. So is that we are really going to assure that we get the fruit set with the self-infertile varieties by introducing pollen from an outside source, another variety of dragon fruit. So we're going to work with the bees. And there it is on the pistil. We've just loaded it down with pollen, right? So, if the flower is self-fertile, that means that the pollen inside that flower can be taken off and put onto the pistil, its own pistil, and the flower will set.
And so what's happening is when that bee comes in, it might land on the pistil, it might like work the pistil as it's coming, initially when the flower is opening, it's sort of working its way through the pistil, and it's coming out past the pistil. Anyway, it transfers the pollen from that flower to the pistil. And as you get sexual reproduction pollen on the female. That's it. In the case of, let's see, so, okay, I'm trying to make the transition here. So, we can work with that a little bit, this is not in the perfect sequence, so we're going to have to go through this. Anyway, so this bag is a nylon bag. It's sold for $1 at the Home Depot or Lowe's as a 1-gallon paint screen bag. And you can put it on the flower like this before it opens, the day before it opens. And you can tie it just there at the base, or you can actually tie it with tape, grafting tape or tie tape. And the next day when you come, as it's open, that's actually open in there, the bees were prevented from coming in. Now, you wouldn't want to maybe prevent them from coming in self-fertile varieties, because you're preventing them from pollinating the variety. But in the case of self-infertile varieties, they're just taking the pollen. You actually might need that to transfer to other varieties. So you can see I'm just taking it off there. And there's the flower, and there's the pollen inside. And if you look carefully, when I go in and I pull the anthers, the male parts below the pistil there, you can see that dust. Do you see it there? That dust is the pollen. These are anthers and the pollen sacs on top. So they just released the pollen. And so that's what you really need when you want to transfer the pollen to a self-infertile type. This may be a self-infertile type. I could transfer that pollen onto that pistil and not get fruit set. Okay? That's the case with most, if not all, color types. Alright? So, what we have here, though, there's a bag adjacent, but this one I didn't bag. Oh, Maggie. Oh, there it is. There's no pollen on there. Yes, so you look, you see, you're picking the pollen sacs, but there's no pollen. And so a lot of people think, and they get up in the morning at 7 o'clock, they go out and collect the pollen. They're really only collecting the pollen sacs. There's no pollen. The bees have been busy, trust me. Unless it was you had a marine layer in the morning, the bees got that at dawn. Right at dawn, before dawn. Just as first light. So that's one of the reasons for the screen. I use the net bags for lots of different reasons, because I'm trying to hybridize. So I want to exclude contamination from other sources. So I'll actually, and I also am trying to determine what is self-fertile and what is self-infertile. So what I might do, if I can go back, what I might do is I might pull the bag off, pollinate the pistil, and put the bag back on. Now I know that flower has only received its own pollen. Alright? And then, if it aborts, it's self-infertile. If it sets, it's self-fertile. Okay? So, okay, let's see. Let's hope it. Okay, so we went through. I'm going backwards. Okay. Oh yeah. All right. So now, another thing you can do though. Oh, there's that. There's a close-up of the anthers without pollen. That's after the bees have been there. See, it looks the same pretty much, except that there's no pollen, there's no dust. They've cleaned it out. Okay, so I want to clean it out before they do. So I use a little vacuum. It's a battery-operated vacuum. You can actually use a little dust buster, those little hand-held jobs. And what I do is did that go too fast? I take a 1 cent coffee filter and I insert it into my vacuum, like so. I put the little attachment on there. The night before, I used the screen so that the bees wouldn't... So I could get up before dawn. I could do this at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I just vacuum out the pollen. How many like this? Yeah, I thought you would. And everybody has those little dust busters. You might have to put, mess around with the filter, but it's pretty easy. It's very easy. And you can, if you don't want to mess with the $1 nylon screen bag, if you don't want to mess around with that, you can just go out with your headlight nighttime and collect it. There's a lot of times, like at 10 o'clock in the night, I go, oh my gosh, I didn't cover that. I didn't cover that flower. So I'll just run out there, I got my little headlamp, and I'll suck 1 or 2 plants for pollen. I've often wondered about my neighbor, because they're quiet in the day, but they're really loud at night, like 10 or 12 o'clock at night, vacuum cleaner. So, so there it is. And you can get as much as you want. So commercial growers, this is how you can grow the varieties that would require hand pollination. We did it. That's how we did it. That's how we grew 5,000, 10,000 plants of Paul Thompson's varieties. We were out there busy collecting pollen with vacuums in the middle of the night. So then the rest, you just take the pollen and you transfer it. It's stuck to the brush there. Just wipe it on that pistil. It doesn't take too much. And you can get from each flower that you collect the pollen in a vacuum, you can get about 20, you can pollinate about 20 flowers. And you should always pollinate the flower that you collected the pollen from, unless it's self-infertile. See, a lot of times I'll need pollen of any type, and I'll screen my self-fertile types. And then I'll collect, but then it has no pollen for itself the next day, so I always pollinate that. It's kind of like a nice thing to do, huh? Okay, so that's the full circle right there. Because now what we've got is, we're back to Edgar Valdivia's hybrid of epiphyllum and Hyloceras undatus. And I'm hoping that you can see how we got there now. That we took the screen, we made our determination that we wanted to cross this one and this one. We collected the pollen from this one, we put it on that one. We took the measures required to make sure there was no contamination, and there we are. Okay. Yes, now for questions. Oh, yeah, the marine layer just prevents the bees from flying. They don't, unless it's really light, they usually stay close to home. So a lot of times you won't see the bees out, especially if there's a thick marine layer, you won't see them out until 8 or 8:30 or something. Then also, because of the cool weather, the flowers will persist longer in the morning. So sometimes you'll see the flowers persist till 11 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock in the morning. Whereas if it's hot, it could close up at 9:30. Question about water? Yeah, I think they like water now. I think they thrive in water, but they can withstand drought conditions. So I tend to put more water on than I think they need, because they're very tolerant. It's extremely tolerant, wide range of soils, right? Wide range of moisture, but very sensitive to temperature. You know, too cold, too heat, too hot. Yeah, it's an interesting plant. Like for example, we missed an entire flower wave. I call them waves because those buds come in like they're triggered by certain environmental factors, day length and heat. And they build up heat units just like deciduous plants build up chill hours. So you have a plant that does low chill, it only got 400 hours, say. Well, have you seen the charts how that works? It's like something like if it drops below 45 degrees Fahrenheit, then it starts accumulating chill hours. If the preceding day's temperature didn't rise above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, this is how they determine chill hours. I think they have a heat requirement similar to that. Oh, the yellow pitaya, the Salinas megalanthus. I don't grow those. I've seen the Hyloceras undatus that's yellow skin on the outside. It'd be nice to work with, but it wasn't available when I first started working. And I hear, but I don't know from first-hand experience, is that it's not. It's something kind of like the group of the Vietnamese type, or the Southeast Asian type, the white type. That the flavor isn't that great. Oh, is it on the white? Okay, and is it the large? Yeah, we just haven't seen it here. I'm not familiar with that one. Okay. Oh, there you go. Steve Berger here? Okay. Okay. So we'll find out firsthand from Steve Berger, is that the claims? Is it a quality? Is it more tropical? 34 or 35. So coastal. Almost like a coastal climate. Yeah. Inland, and you're not going to see any inland. Yeah, that would be protected. Where do you live? Huntington Beach. There you go. Okay. Yeah.
Has your F1 generation, when you did the hybridization of the self-sterile and self-fertile, produced these self-fertile plants?
That's a great question. So you're asking, the question was, do self-infertile plants produce self-infertile progeny?
Well, if you hybridize, you said you hybridize the self-fertile with the self-sterile.
Oh, okay, right.
F1, any of them self-fertile, or are they all self-sterile?
Right. Well, the question was, if I take the self-fertile types, and I hybridize those with the self-infertile, what's the progeny? Okay, never everybody understands that, right? When you're talking to because I've heard a lot about plant breeders today, that what's happening there is that, okay, so you have the male, okay, even though you have two different plants that you're working with, you still refer to them as male, female, even though the plant has a perfect flower of male and female. So we have the male and the female, perfect flower, but one is self-infertile. Nature often does that. Mostly it does that. It doesn't like to inbreed. It's very common for nature not to want. It wants to outcross. So, in fact, very often it selects for only outcrossing. But that's why it's you get actually a very easy response when you transfer pollen. It doesn't take very much pollen because the plant is really receptive to receiving foreign pollen because it's in nature it really invigorates the progeny, the next generation. So if I have a self-infertile and I introduce a foreign pollen source, so the way it's described is you have a maternal source, that's the receiving end, and a paternal source. So now you have two different genomes that mix. What you're doing is you just introduce, and you can do this with any crop. Citrus, they do it all the time. Even the avocado, even this tiny little flower. And apples, of course, all that stuff Xavier was doing with the stone fruits. So that's how that's done. You know, they say, okay, so this, let's use something that we know real well, Washington apple. This red Washington apple has characteristics that we really like, except it doesn't have this or that. So you say, okay, this guy over here has this or that. So what we'll do is we'll take the pollen from that one and introduce it to this one here. And now what you've done is you brought that genome over into this one. So now, what do you have to do? You have to grow that red Washington apple to full maturity and take the seed. The fruit will look identical. So the act of hybridizing doesn't change anything. The fruit won't be morphologically changed one bit. But what will change is the genetic component of the next generation. So then you collect the seed and you grow the seed. And the seed is very much like the human population. In fact, I always think of it like that. So you have the male and the female, and then you have your progeny, you have your offspring. And so in that group of offspring, you're going to get characteristics equal from the female and equal from the male. And so that's what we're doing when we're breeding this. And you can actually breed yourself, especially now since I've introduced this whole concept of screening. So you can be very selective. And so then the question was, after I've done that, will I transfer the self-fertility into the next generation equally? In other words, if I took 100 seeds from that new dragon fruit that I have there, that I hybridized, and I grew all 100 seeds out, would I have half of them self-fertile and half of them infertile? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. Because it's not a single gene transfer. Somehow it's a complex multiple gene. So what that means is that those 2 or 3, the set of genes that create self-fertility have to transfer. So then what ends up happening is you end up having to grow 1,000 of them in order to just get 2 or 3 or 4 that have the self-fertility. That was a long answer, but I thought it was worth it. Okay, so I think my time is not 5 up. Are we good? One more. Okay, so everybody has these problems, right? I have them. You know, you got the one that's growing over there so nicely, and this one over here, no flowers, and this one over here that's growing with lots of flowers, not setting. How to get flowers? Well, likely it's for whatever reason, because they're genetically designed, for the most part, unless you've got some freak, freak variety, they're genetically designed to reproduce. So it's an environmental factor that's missing. So it's either not enough sun, and they're very sensitive to environmental conditions. So if you grow them in too much shade, they don't flower. If they don't get enough heat, they don't flower. So they're kind of a tricky little guy sometimes. plants, but they're genetically designed to fruit for you if you produce the right environmental factor. Your job is just to get the vigor. You get the vigor, you create a certain amount of their required environmental features, and you're going to get the response. Okay, so you got a missing link somewhere. Too much shade, something like that. Oh, same plant. Mm-hmm. Doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you saw the two factors there, and I'll just finish here. The question was, he's been doing the pollination, but he's not getting the results. Okay, so that's why I actually alluded to that. I tried to allude to that with one. You could be transferring pollen when you're thinking you're transferring pollen, but you're not, because you never collected the pollen. You collected the anthers, but not the pollen. That's the one thing. Yeah, well, I could have taken those anthers without pollen and put them all over the place, but there's no pollen. They're gone. The pollen's gone. Unless you collect it at night, the bees got it. Trust me. Yeah, they'll get it. No, dawn. You can get out there at 6:30 in the summer when it's dawn at 5:45, and it's gone. It's absent. So there's another way you can do if you don't want to go to Home Depot and stimulate the economy. What you can do is actually, when you saw that flower getting bulbous, there was the one picture of the night before it opens, right? You see the flower swell up. You can actually take tape and tie that guy closed. Don't let him open. Now, it's plastic tape, not electrical tape. But you can tie it closed, and it won't open the next day, and your pollen will be there. Try that. Well, you don't have to shake it. You can collect it any number of ways. But okay. So then you'll be guaranteed of having pollen. The other thing, of course, is if your variety is self-infertile, and you're collecting from the other tree that's the same variety, it's the same plant. It's the same plant. We can have a hillside of Hass avocado, and it's genetically the same from bottom to top, right? Okay, good day.
Nobody move, please. I want to say to all of you that Ray Martin is one of the best growers in Pitahayas, and he did a lot of research. And I want to apologize for the people that have been sitting on the floor, but when you have a good speaker, that is the problem. So many people stand.